And there we are. Hi, everyone. It's Sarithkin from Montier, and I'm here with Duke Dog. Um,
Well done.
okay, good. From the middle, and I believe you've been king of the middle 7 times. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right, cool. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate in my interview series. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. I've heard great things about you, and I think you've put out a couple of videos on YouTube that
Yeah,
I've
a
watched as well.
few training videos. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of a training video junkie. So um, anyway, we usually start these with your origin story. So if you can tell me when, where, why, how you found the SCA, that would be great.
How I came to the SCA. That is a pretty good story, actually. I'm not sure how typical it is, but um, my freshman year of college, 1981, I went to the theatrical premiere of Excalibur because I'd always, I was all into that, right? So I show up at this theater, me and my roommate, and as I'm walking in through the lobby, there's this guy in the lobby wearing, I kid you not, honest to God chainmail.
Wow.
Now, that was what my 1981 eyes saw. Now we all know that it's the butted wire chain link, stuff that the galvanized stuff. But to me, I've never actually handled that material. All of my D&D characters wore that, so so it was absolutely amazing to me. And so I'm talking to this guy in the lobby. I'm fascinated, and he's telling me about this organization. And I said, okay, well, I said, I got to go see this movie that I've already bought a ticket for, but you're going to be here when I get out. He says, yeah, sure. He was just there, recruiting basically for the SCA. And this was in Grand Rapids at that time. And so I went in the movie, saw the movie, came out even more enthusiastic than I was when I went in, and talked to this guy for another half an hour, probably in the lobby. I invited him over to my apartment the next day, and he shows up in this little Chevy van, and we go out to the parking lot of my apartment complex, and he puts an old blue painted helmet on me that's stuffed full of open cell foam, and he smacks me in the head one time, and that was it. I was in. I was there that night. The next night with him in a borrowed tunic and my cowboy boots, being his little squire boy. So,
Who was that? Does he still play?
oh well, yes, he's not nearly as active as he used to be. But if you've been going to Penzic for many years, Baron Durr would be known to you, and that was the guy before he was a baron, before he was anybody. He was just one lone guy who had moved to Grand Rapids from, I think he had moved from either Meridies or what's now Aytonville at that, was still the East at that point. He was just starting an SCA group by himself.
Wow.
Well, there had been an SCA group there before, but it had kind of fallen into inactivity. There were a couple of people, mostly from the barony to our south. Kalamazoo was the seat of that barony, which was basically the west side of Michigan. So there were a couple of people down there, but there was nobody really in Grand Rapids. So me and him and a couple of guys he recruited from work, and other people, fringe people that we knew, we dragged them all in and started a little group with about 6 people.
Wow. So the thing that you went to the next night, was that like a business meeting or a social?
No, back to the theater lobby with him, still recruiting. I'm just standing there, handing him his sword, his Charlie 5 wall hanger sword to show off, or his helmet, or his gauntlets that looked like they were made out of a 55 Buick because they still had paint on them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, things were different then. But
So
when it was all there was, it was fascinating.
yeah. So how did you get your armor together?
How did I put my armor together?
Yeah.
I was inspired in my first few sets of armor by Conan,
Okay.
the movie. So I don't like to dwell on those first few sets of armor very much. But there's a lot of leather with rings and studs and stuff that I could make in my apartment living room. I borrowed Durr had a couple of extra helmets, and one of them, me and another guy traded it to do our authorizations, the initial authorizations at that time. But it was when back in those days, I wore for armor what I wear under my armor now. So, it was a pad on the elbow, a volleyball pad on the elbow. You had to wear pads on both knees. You wore two pads on your left knee, one on the front and one sort of shifted over to the side and nobody had cuisses then. Well, I was the first guy in my local group to have one cuisse made out of Kydex into a cylinder and tied to my belt with a leather thong. And I got made fun of for being a sissy. So we were hard back then.
Yeah. So I think everybody comes from humble beginnings. So I think it's kind of cool to hear about your first armor.
Oh yeah, right down to my Nike tennis shoes.
Did you choose a name back then? Was it the same name, or have you evolved the same name?
No, same name.
Is there a cool origin story of your name?
Well, I wanted to be a Viking because at that time, my first thought was, Vikings get to wear pants. So I think that's why a lot of guys initially settle on a Norse persona, right? There's no hose, no leggings, no tights to wear. And you're not wearing long dresses, but I've since gotten better about that, by the way. My wardrobe has expanded to include just about everything. But the persona, so it's going to be Scandinavian. The more I searched into it and realized that, well, Viking is just a term that we've applied to all the Scandinavian people, right? So I decided I wasn't going to be a Viking. I was going to be Scandinavian, but I wasn't going to be a pirate, raider, type guy, because we romanticize it a lot, but mostly it was just sort of landing in undefended towns and killing everybody and taking their stuff. Not particularly heroic from that. Amongst themselves, they tell lots of heroic stories. But this was Hagar the Horrible, right? It's just business. This is my job. I go to England and I steal stuff and I come back. I'm going on a business trip. So I had decided that I wasn't going to do that specifically. But when you take a name, people assume, oh, you're Viking. Yeah, and then, how many times do you want to explain that difference? But
right.
But the name Dog, I bought a couple of books on sagas and I just started flipping through them to find a name. I first looked at the sort of Scandinavian version of my mundane name, which is Jeff, and that equivalent was translated to me as Herjolf, which too hard to pronounce. I decided if you're going to make something of yourself in the organization, you need to have something heralds can pronounce. I'd figured that out. So I saw two entries in these sagas. One was a person named Svipdag, which is actually just means dog the swift dog.
Yeah.
Okay, so his name really was Dog. He became Svipdag because his nickname got melded to it. And then there was an actual in Harald Hardrada's saga of a Norwegian prince named Dag Ringson. Okay, so Dog's a totally legit name, easy to pronounce, I thought at the time. I get Dag a lot, and I'll answer to that. That's no problem. And Thorgrimsson just seemed like an easy construction from the period, and then I went sort of on a quest to get a nickname. It didn't seem legit to me to claim a nickname, like to register my own nickname. I thought that should come from your deeds or something in the Viking Scandinavian way. So it took a while before I had what I was given by a king who was a friend of mine, a legit nickname.
And what's that?
Well, Black Wolf is how I will sign it sometimes, but it's Svartvargur is the Icelandic translation of it.
Cool. That's cool. I actually have a friend whose dog is named Sparta. Black.
He's black?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. Okay, so did you guys put together your own fight practice? Because there probably
Oh,
wasn't a
yeah.
fight practice. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. We would just go down to the, excuse me, go down to the local public park and put on our stuff and hit each other's sticks. My sophomore year of college, I actually had a motorcycle was my only means of transportation. So I would arm up, hang my shield over my back and my helmet on the sissy bar and wear a regular motorcycle helmet to ride on the streets. But so yeah, that was me.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was cool, but if I saw pictures of me now in my old red CB 350 and my blue jeans and my rawhide leggings tied up with thong, I'm not sure I would have looked as cool as I thought I was at the time.
So what was your first like real event?
My the first one, or the one that was most memorable to me, I guess, was a small event. I couldn't even really tell you what the name of the event was, but it was in Lansing at the Michigan State University. I think it was at the Armory. It was a dry hockey rink, is what it was. Um, where I met, I met the king and I met the prince and I met all these important people at this event of about 75 people. But that's the most memorable because it marked sort of the beginning of a trajectory for me, the way I wanted to do the SCA. And I'm going to drop some names to anybody who's watching this from the middle will recognize. But when I walked in, me and Durr and the other guys that were with, none of whom are active anymore, as far as I can tell, we're walking in at the far end of the rink, right? And so the tournament is at the last third of the end of the rink. And as we're walking in, Durr sort of leans over to me and he gestures to the crowd of guys who are, in various states of getting their armor on and everything. We aren't authorized yet. We're just showing up to see what this is all about. So we are walking. As we're walking, I'm looking at everybody and I can't see any crown in evidence, right? The obvious clues aren't there. But I'm looking at the guys and how they're armed. What are they wearing? And I'm looking for a guy who looks like a king, whose his stuff is all of a piece, right? But even more than that, more importantly, wasn't how he looked, it was how he carried himself and almost more importantly, how other people reacted around him. That became the big clue. And that one was Duke Sir Laurelin of Song and Story in the Mid-Realm. But he, and I've told him this before in my little fanboy way over the years, that he really was one of the exemplars of what a king in the SCA should be to me. So I tried to use him at least as a component of the model I built for myself as a king.
Was he king at the time?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And you said that event sort of defined your trajectory and the way you wanted to play the SCA. Can you explain that?
Well, in that I think we're all playing roles here, right? This is a LARP, whether anybody wants to really admit it. And the roles we play, I think, are somewhat defined by our rank, by our persona. There's lots of factors, right? And for me, as a young participant and new to the organization, what I really wanted, I wanted to see other people playing those roles. I wanted knights to be valorous and knightly, and I wanted ladies to be noble and graceful, and all of these things that had gone into all of our sort of neo-Victorian fantasy things. And part of me wanted also I wanted that difference in station to be something that was part of the game, right? Knowing intellectually we're all Americans here and we all have the same rights, and nobody can really do anything to me
Right.
within the organization, right? Nobody can make me do anything I don't want to do. So, but embracing that and taking that on and playing the role at first of the servant, taking on the lesser role in the play. You know, you come in as an extra, as a spear carrier, and eventually you work your way up to a lead character, but playing that role to other people. And you can only really play to the audience in your head, right? Which is yourself. So because of the experience I wanted when I started, I try and supply that experience to other people through my role in the organization. Does that make sense?
Sense. So
Not everybody agrees with it or likes it. It can be, if you don't have the right mindset, I can be a little off-putting, I would say, when I'm playing the role.
okay. I get that. So was that where you sort of decided, hey, I'm gonna go on this path to be a knight and maybe eventually king?
Not to, honestly, not to be a knight so much. That wasn't, like I said, my first inspirations were Conan the Barbarian, not, Galahad. But I learned as I studied the Middle Ages, as you do, sort of, and as you pick it up by osmosis in the organization, you almost can't help it. And as I saw other good knights in the society and what they could inspire and what they could accomplish in that role, that brought me around a little bit. Gaining the rank was never a thing, really. Having the rank even isn't so much the important thing. It's trying to live up to the faith people have in you. I think that sort of keeps me and everybody else in line, I think.
Right.
So that's what I wanted to do, was become one of those, because I appreciated it so much. I wanted to become one of those people that fostered that feeling and that inspiration. So.
Okay. So how did you decide to do that?
Well, it was pretty clear. The first thing you got to do is kick everybody's ass and then make them like you for it. So I enjoyed it. It was SCA fighting was kind of a strange confluence of skills for me. I was a second string athlete in school. I was always put in the role of I played a little, in high school, I had to hold down a job almost full time. So I didn't really play much in high school after my sophomore year. But before that, in football and in basketball, I was always like the second string quarterback or second string guard, where I was good at reading a field, and my passing was accurate. I just didn't have a good jump shot because I wasn't tall, and I didn't have a long arm in football, and my coach was pushing a passing game. So I was, I could throw like a laser inside of 20 yards, but after that, I just couldn't get the kind of distance that they wanted. So, and on top of that, I found that I was never really a big believer in team sports. And it's a character flaw of mine, I guess, that if I win, I want the credit. If I lose, I don't want to blame anybody else. And in a team sport, there's always an element of both of those, right? If no matter how hard I play, if the team loses, I lost. And no matter if I've been riding the bench the whole time and the team wins, I don't feel like I won anything, you know? SCA combat was a very visceral one-on-one competition. There's nothing between you and your opponent, no refs, no nets, no, it really hit me in exactly the right spot. And didn't require, our game really doesn't require superior athleticism.
Right.
Obviously, I mean, look at the guys who are really excellent in the sport, right, and have been for 30-year careers. Most of them are passingly athletic, but I'd say, I don't know if it's so true anymore, but I would say that a large percentage of them weren't athletic and still aren't particularly athletic, and that fighting is really the only thing they do that is physical.
Right.
So it's more about skill than about I don't know, any genetic advantage you might have. And our rules are made that way, and I like that.
So what did you do to train yourself to be a good fighter?
Man, I just practiced a lot. Honestly, I sparred with anybody who would take the time to put armor on. For a while, I was doing 2 practices a week. For about 2.5, 3 years, I was doing 2 practices a week, 3 events a month. As much as I could get out there and do it. I didn't do a lot of Pell work. I know that people hate to hear somebody successful say that, but I just, I lived in an apartment. I didn't have a Pell available to me. All my friends had to serve in that capacity. So, but yeah, I just I was out there doing it as much as I could.
And did you end up squiring to somebody?
No, I did not.
No? Did you have mentors?
Oh yeah. I kind of forced anyone who came in contact with me to mentor me in one way or another. Like I said, I didn't get a lot of, I don't know, backing, if I can use that term, that, I didn't have somebody that I could turn to all the time for advice or help, or, help with my arm or anything. I had to do all of it kind of myself, partly because where I was at when I started. But I found that anybody I asked for help, any night that I approached and said, hey, can we have a few passes and can you give me a few pointers? They were all absolutely happy to do that. I kind of had to figure out the social parts of it myself. That took me a little while.
Was it intentional not to squire to someone?
Well, no, not particularly. I think that as my first 3 years, there were just no nights within striking distance. And by the middle of my 3rd year of fighting, I felt like I was starting to win. I was finishing in the top 3 or 4 in the tournaments I was fighting in. And my pride at the time told me that I don't need these guys now. They're coming to me. Well, I've already done all the hard work, and now they're coming to me to get some kind of cachet.
Okay.
Now that's a broad stroke, and that's not true. I know that there were a couple of individuals who have been very good friends, remain my best friends, who Duke Eliyahu asked me to become a squire, but he was only knighted a couple of years before me, and he told me then that I'm not doing this because I think I can give you something. He was basically offering to be my advocate in meetings.
Right.
But it just didn't feel right at the time. I thought I felt too much like his peer, really, to squire to him. So no, I'd had the household experience with Durr. Me and this cadre of guys, and we'd go to events and we'd fight together and we'd, help each other out. So I'd had that experience already. And about that time, Durr was moving away out of kingdom. The other guys were going inactive, and I was kind of on my own. I mean, that's when I moved to Ann Arbor, where I am now, and have been since like 1984, and just became part of that sort of family. That was a very tight knit, active group. So yeah, squiring was not something I looked for.
Did you ever feel like you needed some sort of guidance though? Because sometimes when people get close to getting knighted, there's like some kind of thing they need to jump over, or some sort of massaging or whatever. Did you have someone that sort of gave you that advice?
You know, I can't think of an individual that was there to do that for me on a regular basis. I suspect I got a lot of it, whether I
Right.
internalized it at the time. I must have done something. I must have, some of it must have scraped off on me at some point, because I did learn to keep my mouth shut and keep my foot out of it.
Okay.
I tell a story of how there was a time when I thought I was never going to get knighted, never, because I was at an event. This was another event in Lansing that was called Squires Revolt, and this was an event where it was kind of a joke. You know, we had a lot of the knights in the middle were concentrated in that part of the state around the Lansing area, and this event every year they would say the knights are going to hold the field as a group in a melee against all of their squires at once. And you know, it got to be a joke, but it was a much closer fight than you might think. And eventually somebody suggested that, well, that's kind of exclusive. Why don't we just let everybody fight? Well, and the knights wouldn't let anybody who wasn't a knight fight on their side. So it got a little overbalanced. And at one point, you know, I showed up for this, and it had a melee component to it. The whole event did. So I had brought a melee in the mid round. We have war shields and tourney shields, especially back then, when our tourney shields were basically 26 inches. So I had a big plywood war shield, and they were calling for this Knights Against the World melee. So I went and I got my melee shield. And as I'm walking by one of the knights there, he said, "Where are you going with that?" And I looked at him like, "Well, it's a melee. This is my melee shield." And he looked at me and said, "Well, you're never going to get knighted using a shield like that." Now, anybody else might have thought twice and said, maybe I could show myself better if I went back and got a smaller shield, or used two weapon like I tended to at that time, or polearm, whatever. No. What I said was, "It may surprise you, sir, that it's not every little boy's dream to become a knight."
Ooh.
And I turned my back on him and walked over to the melee field. And it hit me very quickly that was probably a mistake. And I had probably, that's the most succinct story in a series of similar stories over the years, but
So
I learned to curb that.
how did you overcome that to decide that knighthood was something that you wanted and you were going to accept?
Well, in fact, it was a huge surprise to me when it was finally offered. Surprised in that it took me about 4.5 years to get knighted. It seemed quick for somebody who hadn't been a squire, and I didn't know that I had anybody speaking for me in the meetings and whatever. So I expected it was going to be, if it ever happened, and like I said, I didn't really care that much about it in the first place. If it happened, it was going to be a 6, 7, 8 year project for me. But my armor, you know, I kind of dressed up my armor as much as I could. And this is going to sound like a terrible boast, but there was about 1.5 years where I just won every tournament I went to. And I think they knighted me because they couldn't not anymore at some point. So I didn't, and I requested a vigil. I was not the first, but I was one of the first few who requested a vigil separate from the day's event.
Okay.
Because back then it was you were put on vigil in the afternoon, and you went, or in the morning, and you went and sat your vigil over somewhere, and then you were knighted that evening. And I actually wanted more time and more advice than I could get in a day of sitting in a busy tournament hall. So I found this place, one of the local members had a clubhouse at their apartment complex that I was able to use, and I invited all the knights in the region to come and have dinner, buffet style. I sat in a chair with bread and water, but I let everybody else eat at the buffet and whatever. And I listened to them because I had to really make a decision, because my pride still made it difficult for me to swear fealty. And I had to think about taking the baldric, which was not something very common in the middle. There's only been 3. Well, no, 4, I don't know, less than, you can count them on one hand. Yeah. So I was thinking about it, but listening to these gentlemen speak, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the only real way I can make this thing work, the biggest act of humility I can think of, is to make that oath, is to basically give up my right to say no to a king who I don't know personally, every 6 months. So that was really it. It was an expression, an attempt at humility. Other people may argue whether that was a failed experiment or not, but that was really it. That was the decision makers, that I thought that the organization is worth putting myself in this position for. That I'm going to try and be a real working part, in a real working component of this machine, so that the organization can do better, can have more.
And did you feel like you made that transition when you got knighted?
I think so. I took it seriously when I took the oath. In the middle, we have a tradition, sort of, that you're never out of fealty. You swear your fealty, and you merely renew it to each king. And that renewal is, in my mind, is more for the populace than for the knights themselves, to see it done, continuing the tradition and maintaining the position of the chivalry in the kingdom. So yeah, I feel like I've made that transition pretty thoroughly over the years. Given my attitudes about a lot of other things now, I'm pretty well indoctrinated. So
so for your actual knighting part, since you didn't have a knight, what kind of regalia did you get, and who did you get it from?
I got hardly any, honestly.
Okay.
I supplied my own sword. The chain I got was a chain that I had given to the first knight, to Duke Eliyahu, just before his knighting. I had made a gift of it to him, and he gave it back to me and it became the knight's chain of Cinnabar, right? But that's long gone. That has since passed,
Right.
15 nights ago. No spurs. My belt was a plain strip of white leather with a stainless steel ring on the end of it that, again, Eliyahu found. I'm not even sure where. He might have gotten it at that event. But that was it. I didn't get the legacy chains, or legacies were shorter then anyway. So
right. Right. Because you got knighted in 86, right?
Yeah, February 1st of 1986.
Okay, so were you fighting in crowns before you got knighted, or was that a decision you made after you got knighted?
No, I was invited. Now the Midroom also had invitational crown tournaments by that time. And I was invited to my first crown tournament a year after I authorized. And at that time, well, if you thought you were on any kind of path to elevation, you went and fought in crown tourney, because more knights were there at a single event than any other. And that's where you were going to get seen. And for me, it was a competition like no other in the organization, right? The winner of this, it means something, who wins and who loses. So that edge of competition was important to me then. So I really enjoyed the contest. So yeah, so I won, or I fought in my first one in probably May of '82, I think.
Okay.
And I've fought in, I can say with relative confidence that I fought in more crown tournaments in this kingdom than anyone else.
Okay. So crown is something that you enjoy competing in.
Yes, I have. I always have.
Okay.
Uh,
Go ahead.
well, it's, everybody's in their best stuff.
Right.
Everybody's trying to fight their sharpest. Every bout means something. It's, every win, every loss counts towards the end of the results of the tournament. So yeah, that thrill of it is important, and I don't get it from most other tournaments.
Do you have a mental preparation that you do for tournaments and for crown tournament in particular?
Well, if I ever did, it's long forgotten. Part of, I think, if I have any advantages in crown tournament anymore, it's because I fought in so many, it's familiar, and the pressure of winning it. I mean, I've got really nothing to prove to anybody. So the pressure of fighting crown tournament is low at this stage of my career. But mostly I have a whole treatise out there somewhere, I think, on Legio Draconis, that's about preparing for crown. And it's not so much about this mental space that I have to develop. It's making sure everything is squared away with your armor and your day camp or whatever, just trying to get all of that set so that you can forget about it, so that you can concentrate on being in the tournament. You just don't want any distractions, right? So that if I have any ritual or any process, it's about eliminating distractions from the tournament. And even during the tournament, I'm not one of these guys who talks about like this focus. You got to focus, this laser, line to the victory. And I've never been a proponent of the mindset of, I've heard some very outstanding fighters talk about enforcing your will on your opponent. And that's never really been part of my mindset. I'm not trying to dominate another guy's fight. I'm trying to invite him into mine. And I think that causes fewer problems in the list. I think it allows communication a little easier, which is extremely difficult in crown. It's something we have to facilitate. So I couldn't really say that I have this, this 12-step program that for getting ready for crown. Simple things like I say, make sure that you physically touch your authorization card and all of the necessary documentation you got. Make sure you physically touch it the night before and put it in your suitcase or in your bag or in your wallet or whatever. Even if you always carry it in your wallet every day of your life, take it out, look at it, touch it, put it back in your pocket. There. Make sure your lucky t-shirt is packed, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
no regimen getting ready for Crown. Although, I will say this, leading in the practices, the several practices leading up to Crown, when I'm practicing, I'm not practicing my techniques anymore so much. Those should have been working by now, or it's too late. But I'm narrowing the gap of what's good. I'm really trying to convince myself to work hard to find, because at practices and at regular tournaments, we're fighting in this range of what's good, what's just barely good enough, and what's maybe a little harder than you want to, you want to talk to your opponent about, whatever. So I'm trying to narrow that. Like, anything below this is no good, and anything above that is perfectly good. I'm trying to define that line for myself so that I don't have to think about it. That's the only mental sort of preparation that I do leading up to a Crown, is narrowing that band of what's good. And the other thing I usually do, my adage is, 1 week to rest, 2 weeks to heal. And if you're practicing hard, getting ready for Crown, I stop practicing the week before, 2 weekends before the tournament, and I stop working out. I don't do any workouts the week of, maybe some light aerobic stuff, just to feel like, just so I don't get out of the habit.
Right.
But because I don't want to have any sore muscles. I don't want to have any lingering injury, like a smashed finger or a wonky knee or any of that. So I take 2 weeks off where I'm not fighting at all, and a week off where I'm just resting before the tournament. And so that's, if you can call that preparation by doing nothing, I guess that would be my version of preparation.
Well, I really think it is preparation, because you're getting your brain and your body to where you feel also where you feel like you can perform at your ultimate level, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's about building or maintaining confidence, and feeling good helps your confidence. So feeling healthy, feeling rested, feeling sharp, you try to get as good a night's sleep as you can the night before if you're in a hotel somewhere. That's always been hard for me. I don't sleep well away from my own bed anyway. Very light. Yeah, right. I'm a very light sleeper, so weird noises wake me up at, so I in those cases, I try and just rest. I go through a little mental relaxation thing in my head so that I can just lay there with my eyes closed and rest my body as much as I can if I can't go to sleep. Oftentimes I'll drift off no matter what. But
For tourneys, is your weapon system sword and shield usually?
Well, it has become that of late. I authorized with polearm the same, my initial authorization, sword and shield and polearm the same day. And I won my first tournament with a polearm, fighting that exclusively during the day. So I was initially a polearm fighter. Then I switched over to 2-weapon, and I fought that for a long time. Won most of my crowns primarily with 2-weapon. But over the years, I'm feeling more like I want to have more fun. I want to have as equal a contest as I can with my opponents. So when I'm not in Crown tournament, I've been fighting more sword and shield, which has probably made my 2-weapon suffer and made me a little better sword and shield fighter in Crown. So I've shifted to sword and shield. This is my first Crown tournament I was in a finals in with Duke Palomar. Neither of us were knights at the time, 2 unbelts. We were the first in the mid-realm to have 2 unbelted fighters go all the way through Crown. And he won. But some photos exist from those finals, and it's pretty clear that neither of us know what we're doing with a shield. We were both 2-weapon fighters, but the rules required us to fight sword and shield. So I borrowed one. I think he owned his own, which gave him an advantage. But it's it's ridiculous. All the pictures of the fighting they're like cat videos of cats jumping in weird directions, and yeah.
So when you say two weapons, do you mean two swords?
Two swords, yeah. Yeah. No
So
madus, no spear, none of that stuff.
so tell me about reining. So you've reigned 7 times. So there must be something you like about reining. What is that?
Well, again, it's the playing the role. It's, to me, I'm a terrible administrator. I've done local offices, Knights Marshal, Herald, that kind of stuff. But I am the worst paperwork procrastinator in the world. So it would be a horrible, and guys have tried to get me to be Earl Marshal the Middle on 3 or 4 different occasions over the years. I'm like, no, dude, the last thing you want is to have me in charge of anybody else's paperwork.
Right.
So I've stepped away from that. But what I can do, I feel that the best service I can provide to the organization, the greatest service, is being king, is because I believe that the Crown's job is to provide the theater. I tell people that we're all writing our own play with ourselves as the protagonist in our head when we're at SCA events, right? We're all telling our own story to ourselves. The Crown, are background characters. We're NPCs to somebody else's story. But providing a memorable character in that story is good for the story.
Right.
Right? Providing memorable scenes in the story is good for the story. So that's what I feel like I can do as king. I've got control of the stage, so to speak. And that's what I enjoy most about it, is putting that show on for people.
What do you do to put the show on that is unique to you?
Well, unique to me, I don't know if it's terribly unique, but well, I'm kind of, I guess, infamous for having the hourglass court, having the reign where the kingdom actually owns a 1 hour sand glass. And I don't know where it came from or when it was donated, but I was surprised to see it in the inventory when I won Crown. I said, I want that. And I used it in court. At the beginning of court, I would turn the glass over, and I made a promise to the populace that I would not waste their time in court, and that I would be done with this court before that hourglass ran out. That required me to develop certain techniques and had to educate some heralds in certain things in order to make court efficient without shortchanging anybody the attention they deserve when they get an award. I've liked to do story arcs over reigns. I've done those a few times. My 6th reign, which I thought would be my last reign, I was actually abducted, and there was a imposter reigned in my place for the reign. He was bad. He was a bad man. He was mean and cruel, and he was going to annex all of our principalities back onto the Mid-Realm.
That's fun.
Yeah, and there was a whole, I did this whole thing in court. I leaked a video from an event where you could actually see me being abducted in the background, and my queen and I, we published a website for the reign, and it looked like an open book, right? When you open up the web main page, it looked like a book. Sticking out of the corner of between the pages was a little edge of a sheet that said Secret Evil Journal. And if you clicked on that, it took you to this series of journal entries made by the imposter after every single event, and what he did and what his motivations were and how ridiculous these people were. And people got into it. It was fun to do. And when we were stepped down, Oh, and during the reign, I created a character called basically sort of a Robin Hood character who was trying to thwart me the entire reign and stealing taxes and disrupting courts and doing all this stuff. And I had a costume for that. I made a costume for that character. And every event we went to, I would recruit a different person. I would put them in the cloak and I'd give them instructions, and they would do a thing, and it would be a big little bit of shtick, in the middle of court or wherever. And then at the end of the reign, when we were to step down, this person came into court, and well, after I had no, let me remember my script. No, he revealed himself in court after we had done our final business. We'd sent all of our champions away and everything. I had revealed my plan to annex Eldermere and North Shield and Callantyr back into the middle. And I wanted to reconsolidate the greatest kingdom in the known world's history and all that stuff. And I had this plan, and I had this army of mercenaries waiting on the border of Eldermere for my word. And I made this long speech, and then this character, this Greythorn is what he was called, comes into court and says, no, he's going to stop me. He can't let this go on. And he reveals himself to be the prince, who has been all the time, the implication there is that he's all the time been undermining my evil reign. And I call the knights forward to arrest him, and they side with him, much to my rage and surprise, of course. And so I start threatening all of them. I tell them I'm going to raze their keeps to the ground. I'm going to drive their families into the wilderness. And I'm going on, and I'm approaching this maniacal peak. And I just sort of start gasping and choking, and I turn around to look at my queen, who is now standing behind me, and there's a knife sticking out of my back. I collapse to the stage, and she wipes her hands off on a silken handkerchief and has them take the body away. And she crowns the prince herself and the princess, at which point this scruffy figure in rags and long hair and an iron mask is brought out into court. That was a quick change, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But, and it's revealed that it's me. It's the real dog has now been found, and he's reunited with this queen. And well, he's too weak to continue as king. So you go ahead and keep it. So that was probably
cool.
the biggest piece of theater that I did.
That's very elaborate to have that thread all through your reign, and to
yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, that's
I wouldn't want to have had to do that much. It was a lot of work, and doing that every reign would have been a trial.
I'm sure. It sounds like a lot of work. So I'm going to shift just a second. Kith wants me to ask you, what do you feel like your greatest contribution to the society is, and why?
Well, that's funny, because Kith has told me that probably my greatest contribution to the society was writing Miles and the Knight. That story, I don't know if you've encountered it before, but
I don't know.
It's a little SCA parable that I wrote years ago. And I see it resurfacing in people's Facebook posts. And at the time, it was written for the Kingdom of Eldermere, after it had seceded, had broken away, challenged us to an ANS competition, an ANS war, the mid-round. And I wrote this story to be told as a spoken piece that I performed at that, and we won that war. But I said, oh well, this was a nice little piece, and it's got the right feel to it. So I published it on Legio Draconis years ago, and I kind of forgot about it. But it's apparently circulated around, and a lot of people. I'm gratified to think that a lot of people have drawn some inspiration from it.
Is that the one about the clearing and being on the journey?
Yeah, the woods and yeah, sure. That's it.
Cool. I have read it. I didn't know that was you, though.
Yeah, that was probably 30 years ago. No, not that long.
So Kit just posted the link to it. Do you agree with Kith? Do you think that's your greatest contribution?
Well, I get it's certainly something I can point to and say, here's a thing. I'd like to hope that this kind of theater and the presence of the crown that's providing that kind of an example, at least in the middle, I like to think that has helped to preserve and promote the dignity of the crown. And I think that that's an important thing that needs shoring up every once in a while. I have not traveled super extensively to other kingdoms. I mean, I've been to other major wars and stuff over the years, but most of my activity level has been centered at home here in the middle. So if I have any impact, it's probably limited. I mean, I've been king 3 times at Pennsic, and who knows, what impact that has on people. But again, you try and put on the show, right? That's the biggest stage we've got.
Well, I don't think you can be king 7 times in a kingdom and not make a significant impact on the culture of the kingdom, and shaping it and making what you thought was important at the beginning of having the character important, right?
Yeah. Well, I hope so, because I've created awards, and you are, as king, you're present for a lot of history. You're central to history, but I don't think you can always claim credit for it. You are riding a tide of history as king in many ways. You're trying to keep the ship of state afloat, so to speak, that quote. And I talk about, I have a little handbook that I give to war kings, just sort of a warning if it's their first time, for what they're looking at, how much work they have to start doing right now. But one of the things I say in there is that the Mid-Realm Dragon is large and has a lot of inertia, and it's well armored in its scales of tradition, so it's hard to hurt it. If you want to try and do something, you want to accomplish something, go ahead and try it. You're not going to hurt the kingdom in any lasting way. It has too much inertia of tradition. Right. But the warning is that you may be torn apart by its claws, which is public opinion. I think I was watching your interview with Belharic, and he mentioned that the Middle Kingdom is, I don't think he used the word, but I heard it in my head, mired in tradition. But I think that there's some value in that kingdoms, like real kingdoms, are built in traditions. It can slow change, I suppose. And occasionally when change is necessary, it requires a greater effort. But it also means that you have to examine change for its necessity. You have to act in this kingdom. You have to act with thoughtfulness, and you've got to convince people that this needs to change. Because you can make law, but your predecessor can undo it. Every king knows this. Right. So if you're going to make a change, you want to make it a lasting change. So the change has to be, if not popular, at least demonstrably necessary. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I don't think I had much to offer beyond that.
I was just going to say, tradition is important because it develops culture and unity and identification with a common purpose or common group, right?
Right. Sure.
Yeah, and so I don't know what my point was, but
well, some traditions are silly. We know that we're the SCA, for God's sake. We are.
Right.
That's what we do, is silly traditions. we make traditions out of everything, anything.
So you had said that you thought your sixth grade was going to be the last, but you did a seventh. Do you have any plans to do an eighth?
I would like to do one more, and it's because I have this weird personal thing. This may be the platform that makes this a grassroots movement across the SCA, but I don't know. I think this organization is old enough, and we have people who have served so long and with such distinction that I think an archduchy rank, not even a rank. I don't even think of it as a rank. I think it is a title of courtesy for someone who has served their kingdoms so many times. And I think that number should be 4.
Okay.
Because it's a logarithmic progression from count to duke to archduke, right? So a duchy is 2 counties, and an archduchy is 2 duchy.
Right.
There's a mathematical. Okay. So I did that with I've had 3 queens, and they are all duchesses. My lady, my current lady, my wife, the only one of whom I married, she has 3 now, and I would like her to have that 4th one, even if it's just in my mind,
Right.
that she's the archduchess, and she would be one of 2 in this kingdom. I'm one of 3 in this kingdom. So I think that dukes used to be rare on the, thin on the ground when you went anywhere, but that's not really the case anymore. So I think it would be worthwhile, and who knows who it would bring back out of the woodwork. And I also know why it would be fought by, the whole concept will be fought tooth and nail by a lot of dukes. But my vision of it is that it's not a new rank. It's a title of courtesy only. It doesn't change your precedence. It doesn't do anything. You're still equal in precedence and rank and all that. It's a title of courtesy to show that you've done extra. You didn't do it to get the title. You did it to do the work. Because you don't go, it's work.
Right.
Anybody will tell you, and you don't go back if you're not willing to do the work or happy to do the work.
Yeah, I think that it's sort of almost a recognized thing anyway. I wouldn't have called it archduke, but people call it super dukes or uber dukes or whatever.
Right, and that's kind of my point, is that we already have them.
Right.
But the terms are not period.
Right.
Why don't we recognize it with an actual period term? It's just a thing for me.
That's cool. That's really cool. So I've had you over an hour now, and I try to limit these to about an hour. So
Okay.
Let's look at your sword, unless there's something that we haven't covered that you would like to cover.
Oh no, I went into this with no expectations whatsoever.
Okay.
I have 2 swords because while they are similar, and it might be a little hard to show in here. What if
If you hold it in front of you, I usually can see it even with.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up a little more light.
Okay.
I think, if I can. That's a little bit better. So the one I use most often is just the Zoom logarithm is going to cut the ends off of it anyway.
Yeah, that's okay.
But it's basically, this is the peeled 1.25" rattan, no husk. And let me put it this way here. So it's just the edge is marked with tape. The basket hilts are these were custom made for me by Alan Baldry.
Are those spring steel?
No, these are aluminum, I believe.
Aluminum.
Polished aluminum.
They're very pretty.
And the grip is, I make a pretty narrow grip, and I use baseball racket or baseball grip tape. It's got a little bit of cushion. That comes from my 2-weapon fighting, that having that little extra shock absorber when you're blocking with your swords all the time. And so that's my favorite standard weapon. It's a little quicker.
And it looks like you have a trigger in there and maybe some
Yep.
foam at the top.
Oh yeah, and although the foam at the top is also sort of a legacy thing that I did for years, and I'd have to replace it from time to time because my knuckle would ride up against it. But at some point, probably 15 years ago, I changed how I made my grips. And I spent years screwing around with these weird ergonomic shapes and finger grooves and thumb rests and all this stuff. And my knuckle would, no matter what I did, my knuckle would end up against the top of my basket hilt and get hammered on. So I finally just went, I'm just gonna go look at what they did in period, and every sword, every culture, with the exception of, weird pistol grip type things for specific purposes, but it's an oval shape narrowing toward the pommel.
Like an almond.
Yeah. So that's basically all these, it's thicker at the top than it is down at the base, and that's it. So, and the other sword looks a lot like it, heavier basket hilt. And the blade, you can see, this is 1.5 inches shaved down, and it's shaved into sort of an octagon shape. So it's got flats, but it's also got bevels on both sides, and then a flat edge that's only about 1/2 inch wide.
And what's the difference for you, like how you would use both of the swords?
This one's heavier, and I have a pair of each. So if I want to fight 2 weapons, these are a little heavier. If my opponent doesn't like the light ones, I'll go to the heavy one.
Okay.
Or if I'm like at Pennsic, I'll tend to use the heavy one in general, just because there's less problems with kingdom calibrations and stuff.
Yeah.
Now, also at war for battles and stuff, I use a shorter, heavier stick. That's because I'm a shieldman in Pennsic, and I'm just there to block.
Yeah, that's what I do too.
Yeah, so my swords matter little at Pennsic. But so there's nothing fancy about them. They're very standard. I wear a very super minimal half gauntlet with them. They don't even, it just barely covers my hand.
I love that you put foam in your basket hilt, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, if your knuckles are getting bloody when you're fighting, you can fix that. And it's an easy fix. Just a little teeny bit of foam in there. And
well, I used to have these, they're fairly common, these bar stock hilts with like rings welded in between the bars, right? I had those for a long time. And I made this sort of foam cocoon that pressure fit inside there and completely filled up the basket hilt. And then I would use like a leather cover in between that and the bars. And I would like squeeze my hand in there. So I didn't even have to hold on to the sword, really. The sword held on to me.
Yeah.
But I got away from those. These are a little lighter, a little quicker. So, and I like the look of them with the rest of the armor.
Yeah. I think that's really beautiful, the scalloping that he did on your basket. Yeah. Okay, so the final 10. First question: what event have you never gone to that you would like to go to?
Oh boy. Well, like I said, I haven't traveled to a lot. I hear Sport of Kings is an incredible opportunity. I would have liked to go to that when I was in my 30s more than now. I've never been to Estrella and haven't really, the fighting there is not the kind of fighting that I think would generally appeal to me, but I would like to have that sort of inter-kingdom experience. I'd like to do a lot of stuff. I'd like to go to a couple of big events out in the West or in Caid. But yeah, I got to go to Adult Swim last year. It was the first time, and that was great for what it was. I mean, middle of winter in this factory, it's not the most romantic setting, but it is a neat opportunity. Yeah, that's
Okay. If you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
anyone in the world. Well, there's a list of guys that I would like to get a pass with if I haven't gotten with them so far. I had to pass on an opportunity presented to me by Felix, so Duke Felix at that time, King Felix now. The crown tournament that Seto won just before last, Duke Uther was there visiting Felix and was there to attend our crown tournament. So I'm fighting in crown tournament on Saturday. I'm not going to do pickups, that 1 week to rest thing.
Right.
I'm not going to fight pickups Friday night. I'm going to fight in the tournament on Saturday, and I think that was a Sunday actually. So we do our spring tournament on Labor Day, so that we fight on Sunday and everybody drives home on Monday.
Yeah.
But so Felix is saying, you got to fight this Uther. You got to fight him. He's one of the best fighters in the world. You got to fight him. So I'd love to fight him, but I'm not going to fight him, and if I win, I'm not going to have time to mess around after the tourney. So I had to pass on the opportunity, but he wasn't in armor at the end of the tourney anyway. So it wasn't like I could have, just taken a half an hour to go spar with this gentleman. So I missed that opportunity, but I would like to make up for it at some point.
He's well worth the effort.
Yeah. I've got some of the best fighters in the known world live an hour from me. So I get that opportunity whenever I feel like it. So
yeah. All right. Are we talking Branos and Ragnvaldr?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What is your favorite Pennsic story?
Ooh, my favorite Pennsic story. Boy, that's a tough one without embarrassing anybody else. I've got an important historic story, I think, but I hesitate because the people who in the story we have reconciled very well and I would count as if not good friends, at least very friendly acquaintances. But the story revolves around the year, the Pennsic where Jafar had passed away, our king, and Kenna was reigning alone at Pennsic. I was prince at the time. And this is rather a long story. I'm not sure this is best for this, but there was a duel of honor between me and the King's Champion of the East, and the East marched off the field, and somebody killed themselves that war, and that was a factor. And it was, boy, more time and more alcohol, and I will be happy to tell that story. But
all right. Story better in person.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's better when not broadcast.
Okay. That's fine. We can skip that one. Who are your favorite people to watch fight? Who do you like to watch?
Ooh, I like to watch Ron Valder fight. I enjoy his ability to stalk and defeat his foe with his mind. He doesn't have, besides being left-handed, which is cheating in any case. And I'll say that forever. But and he knows, and I kid him about it all the time. But his ability to analyze his opponent and come up with the recipe for their defeat in the shortest amount of time possible, I think is absolutely incredible.
He's brilliant. Okay. Do you have a hero in the SCA? And if so, who is it?
Well, I have so many. I wouldn't call them heroes, because as soon as you make somebody a hero, it's easy to be disappointed in them. But there have been a handful of people that I have tried to model myself after in one way or another. I can say Duke Lorlin was one, in the Kingdom of Duke Moonwolf. Sir Elistron, back in those days. Yeah, there were lots of stellar exemplar members of the chivalry when I started, and I like to think that I was able to pale in pale fashion imitate them and emulate their examples in some way.
Cool. That's cool. If you had to recommend one event in your kingdom for someone out of kingdom to go to, which event would it be?
Well, it would kind of depend on the person. Candlemas is probably the biggest fighting event, but if you're not there for fighting and you're not into fighting, there's not much to recommend it. In Kingdom, my favorite event is a tiny little event and may not show the entire SCA to someone who's new. And it's called Winter Revel. It happens up here in Michigan in January in a little stone and rough sawn timber hall with natural fireplace heat, flagstone floors. You know, it's the most romantic site we've got in the area.
Great ambiance.
I think if someone who's coming to an SCA event to experience the SCA, crown tournaments and coronations, you know, pick one.
Right.
They are, I believe that those are they mark the pulse and the breath of a kingdom's history. So you want to see what the SCA is about, go to one of those. If you want to have fun, go to a camping event and hook up with somebody who knows where the liquor is.
Are your crowns and coronations not camping events?
Not generally, no.
Okay. That's
I
good.
mean, we have them in May and October, and the weather is just too unpredictable.
What book do you think everyone on the path to knighthood should read?
Well, I always enjoyed the Arthur Conan Doyle's White Company books for the romantic example of chivalry that we are all supposed to be pursuing. I mean, it's good to read de Charny and those for the period perspective. Some of the biographies of William Marshall and Bertrand du Guesclin and those guys. I mean, that's if you're trying to emulate a period character, those are good sources. They're not, unfortunately, they're not everything the SCA is about. So for SCA people, yeah, I like the White Company books.
Okay, cool. If you could change one thing about the SCA, what would it be?
Boy, it's hard because I've had to make law, and so you actually do get a chance to make change in the SCA as king, but you've got to be so careful. You know, changing one thing affects a bunch of others more often than not. If I was to change one thing, I would from a sort of legislative perspective at any rate, I'd like to change the way we I'd like to reform the way we do punishment in the SCA, banishments and R&Ds and those kinds of situations that where the organization is in some kind of danger. I would like us to reform that somehow. I would like it to be more formalized, more transparent, maybe. I'm very much a person who believes that justice, it's old adage that justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. I think that I know that we open ourselves up for other problems as an organization, but knowing why someone is being sanctioned is as important as hearing that they've been sanctioned.
Transparency is important on every level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's about, making an example. It's about saying, here's a behavior that we will not tolerate,
Right.
and if you don't know what that behavior was, we have to reinvent that example every time.
Right.
So
That's a good point. What is your favorite in-kingdom tradition?
well, my favorite mid-rum tradition, and I think you will get a lot of queens will back me up on this, is that I like that the knights and all the peers now swear their fealty in unison, the same oath every time. I know that the gentlemen and ladies who have knelt with me and taken that oath are moved every time. My wife Anne Marie has said to me that the time she came closest to bursting into tears was when the knights knelt and swore their fealty to her the first time. She'd spoken of always having a welling of emotion when you hear it. You hear all those voices filling a hall, but to have them all kneeling and gazing into your face and saying it to you is powerful.
Cool. That's cool. All right, last question. What do you think is the most important trait to becoming a successful fighter?
Wow. I'd have to say it's probably perseverance. And that covers a lot of things like sort of mental toughness in the, not the sort of mental toughness that allows you to push through pain, but the sort of mental toughness that makes you put that armor on again and go to practice even though you're a little tired, figure out a way to get to that event even though money's a little tight, but I'm going to share a ride, or I'm going to do whatever. Pushing yourself toward the accomplishment is the perseverance, I think, and just sticking with it, staying at it. If I can do it, anybody can do it, really. I don't feel like I brought any special talents or like I say, no, I have no genetic advantages. I'm an average guy. I'm dead average in pretty much every national statistic. So if I can do it, there's nothing that can keep anybody from doing it. I think our game is set up in such a way as to be very egalitarian, at least from a physical standpoint. Our rules allow anybody to really to succeed, as you say. So I think just staying with it, not getting discouraged. Nobody's good at this their first time, or at least somebody might show some natural talent for it right off the bat, but they're not. That first day in armor, you are not going to be able to compete with somebody who's even been doing it for only 2 years. Right. So I don't know if you have seen, I do a podcast with Duke Eliyahu, the Everyday Knight, everydaynight.com.
Awesome.
Shameless plug. But I posted something there recently that said, I can't remember who the author of it is, but if you don't consider anything that is humanly possible out of your grasp. I think that might have been Marcus Aurelius, actually. If you consider something possible, then you should be able to consider it possible for you.
Right. Well, cool. Thank you so much for participating and sharing your time and your wisdom with all of us. I really appreciate it. I've had a really great time talking to you tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. I'm happy to participate.
Yeah, it's been very cool. So thank you everyone else for joining us. On Wednesday, my sister and I are going to be talking to Duchess Helga from the West, who is also a knight. So that'll be very interesting. And then next Sunday, I'm talking to Bernos.
Oh,
who everybody, pretty much
give him
knows.
my regards. I haven't seen him since the lockdown much.
Have you been watching his Coach's Corner at all? Like,
Yep.
yeah, good stuff there. So anyway, so thank you everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.